Postcolonial Theory, a theory on and lens for life after foreign rule. What puts the post in post-colonialism? Considering post is a prefix meaning after, we need to first discuss the history behind colonialism. What is colonialism? An expansion of nations' rule over territory beyond its border. It also refers to the establishment and maintenance of colonies in one territory by people from another country. Colonialism is the process where the sovereignty over the colony is claimed by the colonizer. The social structure, government, and economics of the colony are changed by the colonist. Colonialism is also referred to the period of history from the 15th to the 20th century, when European nations established colonies in other continents. Colonialism is the relationship between an indigenous majority. The fundamental decisions affecting the lives of the colonized people are made and implemented by the colonial power in pursuit of interests that are often defined by the imperial power. Rejecting culture compromises with the colonized population. The colonizers are convinced of their own superiority and their ordained mandate to rule. Types of colonialism. Pre-capitalist colonialism, before it, the Crusade in the 2nd century. Genghis Khan's invasion of Middle East as well as China in the 13th century. Modern colonialism, European invasion of Africa, Asia and the Americas since the 16th century onward. Causes. Modernization, nationalization, capitalism. The difference between two colonialism. Major difference: modern colonialism did more than extract tribute, goods and wealth from its countries that are conquered. It restricted the economies of the latter, drawing them into a complex relationship with their own, so that there was a flow of human and natural resources between colonized and colonial countries. Modern colonialism, meaning and other type. Modern colonialism, military, economics, culture, oppression and domination of one country, race over another kinds. Invasion colonization, settlement colonization, internal colonialism, neo-colonialism. Internal colonialism, racial domination within an existing territory, uneven wave of industrialization, intergroups difference in power, ethnic division of labor, ethnic identity are forged and ethnic colonies formed, ghettos or internal segregation. Cultural imperialism theories, culture, literature, language, popular culture support imperialism and is one way to spread it. The definition of the self and other are based upon representation rather than reality. A series of binary opposition, exact opposite, were employed at once. The West self is civilized, just modern, industrious, rational, masculine. The Oriental other is savage, lewd, lazy, superstitious, feminine. Cultural imperialism theory, decoration and support for building the empire, biological differences, justification of racism. Edward Said's theory of Orientalism, a concept introduced by Edward Said, attempts to explain how European Western colonized look upon Orient, presenting the East as the other, weaker, less civilized, incredible, weak, as the exotic, e.g., Arabian Nights, Madame Butterfly, and all the images of Oriental women as submissive, sexual, and sweet. The concept of the East, i.e., Orient, was created by the West, suppressing the ability of the Oriented to express themselves. Western depiction of the Oriented construction and inferior world, a place of backwardness and hereditary and wildness. This allows the West to identify themselves as the opposite of these characteristics, as a superior world that was progressive, rational, and civil. New colonialism. The term new colonialism has been used to refer to a variety of things since the decolonization effort after World War II. It refers to the accusation that the relationship between stronger and weaker countries is similar to exploitation colonialism without the stronger country having to build or maintain colonies. Such relationship typically focused on the economic relationship and interference in the politics of the weaker countries by the stronger country. Early European exploration of Asia started in ancient Roman times. Knowledge of the lands as distant as China were held by the Roman. Trade with India through the Roman Egyptian Red Sea port was significant in the 1st century of the Common Era. Medieval European exploration of Asia. 13th and 14th century Christian missionaries sought to penetrate China. Marco Polo. Little permanent effect on East-West trade of a series of political development in Asia in the last decade of the 14th century, which put an end to further European exploration of Asia. Yuan dynasty. In China, receptive to European missionaries and merchants, was overthrown. New Ming's rule were found to be inward-oriented and unreceptive to foreign religious proselytism. Turks consolidated control over the eastern Mediterranean, closing of key overland trade routes. 15th century, only minor trade and cultural exchange between Europe and Asia continued at certain terminals controlled by Muslims. New trade routes. Ocean routes between East and West began with the unprecedented voyages of Portuguese and Spanish sea captains. Cheaper and easier access to South and East Asian goods, influenced by medieval European adventurers who had journeyed overland to the Far East and contributed to geographical knowledge of part of Asia upon their return. 1488, Bartholomew dies southern tip of Africa under the sponsorship of Portugal. John II swung northeast, soon finding a sea route to India and named the tip as the Cape of Good Hope. 1497, Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama made the first open voyage from Europe to India. 1520, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese navigator in the service of Spain, found a sea route into the Pacific Ocean. Portuguese and Spanish trade and colonization Asia. Portuguese monopoly over trade in the Indian century. 16th century, Afonso de Albuquerque emerged as the Portuguese colonial viceroy, most instrumental in consolidating Portugal's holding in Africa and in Asia. Understood that Portugal could wrest commercial supremacy from the Arab only by force. Devised a plan to establish fort eight strategic sites which would dominate the trade routes and also protect Portuguese interest on land. In 1510, he seized Goa in India, which enabled him to gradually consolidate control of most of the commercial traffic between European and Asia. Europeans started to carry on trade from fort, acting as foreign merchants rather than as settlers. In contrast, early European expansion in the West Indies, 1942 voyage of Christopher Columbus involved heavy settlement in colonies that were treated as political extensions of the mother country. Why were people colonized? Social Darwinism, Eurocentrism, universalism. Colonialism is natural, white man's burden, what was taught to be the obligation of European to civilize the non-European people. Supplanter theory by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Supplanter is a term that are commonly referred to persons who are socially, politically, and geographically outside of the hegemonic power structure. The term subaltern was used in post-colonial theory. Some thinkers refer to marginalized group and the lower classes, a person rendered without agency by his or her social status. Subaltern, according to Spivak, not just a classy word for oppressed for other for somebody who is not getting a piece of the pie. In post-colonial term, everything that has limited or no access to the cultural imperialism is subaltern, a space of difference. Now, who would say that? Just the oppressed. The working class is oppressed, it is not subaltern. Many people want to claim subalternity. They are the least interesting and the most dangerous. I mean, just by being a discriminated against minority on the university campus, they don't need the word subaltern. They should see what the margin of the discrimination are. They are within the hegemonic discourse with wanting a piece of the pie and not being allowed. So let them speak, use the hegemonic discourse. They should not call themselves subaltern. Theory of subaltern. Post-colonial theory tries to understand the power and continued dominance of Western way of knowing. John Sharp, following Spivak, argues that other forms of knowing are marginalized by Western thinkers, reforming them a myth or folklore. In order to be heard, the subaltern must adopt Western thought, reasoning, and language. Because of this, Sharp and Spivak argue that the subaltern can never express their own reasoning form of knowledge or logic. They must instead from their knowledge to Western way of knowing. Francis Fanon. Fanon analyzed the nature of colonialism and those subjugated by it. He described the colonialism as a source of violence rather than reacting violently against the resistors, which had been the common views. His portrayal of the systematic relationship between colonialism and its attempt to deny all attribute of humanity it separates laid the groundwork for related critiques of colonial and post-colonial system. Post-colonial theory attempts to the focus on the operation of those who were ruled under colonialization. Factors include political oppression, economic oppression, social cultural oppression, psychological oppression of those who were formerly colonized. In post-colonial theory, the word colonized can mean many things. Literal colonization, more abstract colonization, African Americans, Native American in the United States. Post-colonial theory believed that the colonizer imposed their own values onto those colonized so that they were internalized. Example: social culture, Spanish language, Catholic religion among the formerly colonized, like the Philippines. Political drew the boundaries of Africa based on the European politics rather than tribal interest. Post colonial theory also analyzed the process by which those who were colonized resist and colonizer. Example: Haiti, South Africa, India. Post-colonial literature, sometimes called New English literature, is a body of literary writing that reacts to the discourse of colonization. Post-colonial literature often involves writing that deals with the issues of decolonization or the political and cultural independence of people formerly subjugated to colonial rule. It also a real literary critiques to texts that carry racist or colonial undertone. In its most recent form, it also attempts the critique of the post-colonial discourse that has been shaped over recent times. It attempts to reread this very emerged of post-colonialism and its literary expressions. It's the three subjects of post-colonial literature: social and cultural change or erosion. It seems that after independence is achieved, on question arises: what is the new cultural identity? Misuse of power and exploitation. Even though the large power crisis sees to control them as colony, the central still seem to continue imposing power over the native. The question here: who really is the power here? Why and how does an Independence Day really mean independence? Colonial abandonment and alienation. This topic is generally brought up to examine individual and not the ex-colony as a whole. The individual tends to ask themselves, in this new country, where do I fit in and how do I make a living? Use of English language literature. It may be asked if the target of post-colonial study, i.e., the analysis of post-colonial literature and culture, can be reached, neglecting literary work in the original language of post-colonial nation. What happens after colonization? What language do you speak? What culture do you follow? Hybridization and double consciousness. Awareness of culture before colonized and during colonization and what emerged as a result. Examining colonizer colonized relationship in literature. Is the word pro anti colonist? Why? Does the text reinforce or resist colonist does the text reinforce or resist colonialist ideology? Tries to introduce, expose otherized work. What is the prevalent culture in the work? Resisting, revising the con. Telephone conversation, whole soinkna. The price seemed reasonable. Location indifference. The price seemed reasonable. Location indifferent. The landlady saw she lived off promises. Nothing remained but self-confession. Madam, I want. I hate a wasted journey. I am afraid. Silence. Silenced transmission of pressurized good breeding. Voice. When it come, lipstick coated, long gold rolled cigarette holder piped. Thought I was folly. How dark. I had not misheard. Are you light or very dark? Button B. Button A. Stench of rancid breath of public hide and speak. Red booth, red pillar box, red double tired omnibus squelching tar. It was real shamed by it ill-mannered silence. Slender pushes dumbfounded to beg simplification. Consider she was wearing the emphasis. Are you dark or very light? Revelation came. You mean like plain or milk chocolate? He assent was clinical crushing in its light. Impersonality rapidly wavelength adjusted. I choose in Western African sepia. S and A's afterthought. Down in my passport, silence for spectroscopic. Flight of fancy till truthfulness claimed her accent. Hard on the mouthpiece, words that's conceding. Don't know what that is. Like branity. That's dark, isn't it? Not altogether. Facially, I am brunette, but madam, you should see. The rest of me, palm of my hand, sole of my feet, are a peroxide blonde. Friction caused foolishly, madam, by sitting down his turn. My bottom raven black, and moment madam, sensing her receiver rearing on the thunderclap about my ears. Madam, I pleaded, would not you rather see for yourself?